She's not waiting for anyone. There's no empty seat at the table, no chair pulled out in expectation, no unanswered messages on a forgotten phone. The woman who lives alone without a man is not incomplete. She is whole in a way many still don't understand. In a world where so many relationships have become desperate attempts to fill what only silence reveals, she made a choice that requires courage, to turn toward herself. And that's where the true path of maturity began. It's not isolation. It's a communion with something deeper than another's presence. It's when the noise ceases that she hears clearly her own essence, muffled for years by the clamor of approval, shallow loves, inherited expectations. She's been there. She's looked into someone's eyes seeking identity. She's reshaped herself to fit into spaces where her soul could barely breathe. She's tolerated lukewarm relationships out of fear of the void, until the real void revealed itself, the one that appears when you're with someone yet invisible. Then she stopped, not out of exhaustion, but clarity. What once hurt began to teach, and what once felt like absence became fertile ground for a new kind of presence, her own. The woman who chooses to live alone does not reject love. She simply stopped calling love everything that diminished her. There's no revolt in her steps, only discernment. The maturity born of transformed pain, of a consciousness that doesn't shout but radiates. This woman is not indifferent, she's selective. She's not distant, she's precise. Some confuse her calm with coldness, but they don't understand that her peace is an achievement. What used to be anxiety to be loved has become serenity to love consciously. She understands that true love doesn't feed on need, but on freedom. And until that freedom appears in another, she remains at peace with her own. Because she's learned, and perhaps the hard way, that the price of losing yourself to please someone is too high. Today, her commitment is different, with her own integrity. She is not a denial of the masculine, nor a manifesto against romantic love. She is an affirmation of something that comes before, her own soul. Jung once said that what we ignore in ourselves manifests as fate. And perhaps that's why so many women who walk alone today are, in truth, reconciling interrupted destinies. Inherited pain, imposed roles, silences perpetuated through generations. By choosing their own company, they are not turning their backs on the world, but opening internal doors that have long been locked. What scares others is not her solitude, but what she found within it. A freedom with no barcode, no manual, no dependence. She doesn't need to explain her choices. Her life is not an argument, it's an affirmation. There's no need for persuasion. Those who see only the surface may think she's running away, but only those who have faced the inner desert with honesty know what it is to drink from their own source. She stopped seeking mirrors and became one, and that unsettles those who still live in search of someone else's reflection. Her strength lies in no longer needing to prove anything. The love she desires is rare, one that doesn't ask her to be smaller, that doesn't demand masks, that doesn't measure presence through control. A love that knows how to coexist with her autonomy. She has felt the ground disappear. She's given until she was empty. In other times, she confused presence with attention and attention with love. But the attention she received came full of holes. It required her to erase herself a little more each day. Then came the breaking point. Not with screams or dramatic scenes, but with a definitive silence, an inward gaze that no longer allowed her to keep losing herself just to be accepted. She didn't choose to be alone out of vanity, pride, or frustration. She chose it because she realized that as long as she begged for love, she would never truly live love. And living love, for her today, is not a priority. It's a consequence. The world, however, is in a hurry. It has formulas. It still demands forced smiles at dinner for two, updated relationship statuses, couple photos as a stamp of personal fulfillment. But she's learned that true happiness doesn't need to be recorded. It's felt in the body, in choices, in the peace that fills the absences without turning everything into neediness. The woman who lives alone is not waiting for a hero. She doesn't want a savior, she doesn't want a stage, she wants truth. And that's why she's no longer enchanted by promises. She pays attention to gestures. She's known beautiful speeches, accompanied by empty presences. She's been charmed by the right words and destroyed by constant absences. That's why now she watches in silence and only surrenders when the other is whole too. She's been through transformations that don't fit into simple explanations. She's lived unrecognized griefs, cried pains no one saw. Her sleepless nights weren't caused by loneliness, but by a restless soul that needed to rearrange everything inside. She faced her ghosts, gave names to her wounds, and that is no small feat. What she lives today is what many avoid their whole lives, the encounter with their own abyss, and when one returns from that dive, they never come back the same. She returned more whole, more grounded, more selective, not because she became stone, but because she learned to protect what took so long to rebuild. She knows that love can be beautiful, that sharing life can be light, intense, deep, but not at any cost. She wants someone who isn't afraid of the depth of who she is, someone who doesn't get lost in the labyrinth of her emotional complexity, but walks beside her with a willingness to learn and to teach, who understands that she has been broken, has been shadow, and still had the courage to be reborn. And precisely because of that, now she no longer accepts halves, nor empty promises, nor the silence of someone who doesn't know how to be present. Many don't understand her. They think she's difficult, inflexible, or too demanding. But it's because they've never looked behind this woman. She didn't shield herself by accident. She protects herself because she knows firsthand that her energy is too precious to be wasted on those who don't know how to hold it. She has been fire that warmed those who couldn't return the favor. She's been a shelter for those who only wanted to escape themselves. Now, she's become her own refuge. And that, to those who still live off emotional crumbs, is deeply unsettling. And maybe that's the greatest challenge, to live a freedom that unsettles, a kind of peace that silences those who still believe the only possible happiness is the one shared over 2 glasses of wine and whispered promises. Hers is a freedom built in silence, night after night, where every solitary decision was in truth a reconnection with her own soul. She no longer fits in molds. She's no longer in a rush, no longer afraid of time, because she understands that the soul's timing is not the same as the clock's, and that there are things that only bloom when the seed is finally in fertile soil, and her soil today is internal. And since we're here, if this touched you in some way, if this woman reminds you of someone, or maybe even yourself, do this. Subscribe to the channel. Not because that's what everyone asks, but because maybe, like her, you're also seeking content that respects you, uplifts you, makes you think. And if at any point in this journey you felt something different, write here in the comments not what you thought but what you felt, what it sparked in you. Because we're not here just to watch, we're here to recognize ourselves. She knows not everyone will understand, that the tranquility she now carries may look like arrogance to those who've never had to rebuild themselves in silence. But she doesn't live to please or to explain. She lives to be. And that alone is already a deep rupture with the logic that pushes so many women into soulless relationships just to feel included. The woman who walks alone today is not the same one who once begged for crumbs of attention. The old one no longer exists. She died the moment she decided she would no longer dim her light so others could shine. What few people know is that the path to inner freedom is painful. Breaking invisible emotional contracts, uninstalling old beliefs about affection, learning not to self-sabotage in the face of loneliness. All of this requires a strength that doesn't show up in motivational quotes. It comes from the flesh, from tears, from confrontation. She had to revisit her childhood, understand where her tendency to self-erase came from, identify family patterns of emotional submission that repeated as a silent inheritance. She had to descend to the basements of her soul, where the oldest fears hide, and look into the eyes of the wounds she had always tried to avoid. And it was precisely there, in that dive with no guarantees, that she began to heal. Today, when she walks down the street, there's something different in her posture. It's not the well-done hair or the carefully chosen outfit. It's her gaze, a gaze that doesn't search, but observes, that doesn't judge, but perceives. She's not waiting for someone to start living. She already lives. If someone comes, it will be to walk beside her, not to lead or be led. Because the kind of love she wants isn't shaped by fear. It's stitched together by conscious choice. It doesn't need to be grand in the eyes of others. It needs to be real. It needs to have comfortable silence, respect for space, complicity that doesn't shout but supports. She understands that not everyone will be able to keep up with her. There are people who still love to fill voids. Others still wait to be saved. And that's okay, everyone is in their own moment. But she's already been through too many phases to accept a connection that pulls her backward. Her freedom is non-negotiable. Not out of pride, but out of dignity. Because she learned that every time she ignored her intuition to keep someone around, she lost pieces of herself that were hard to recover. Today, her intuition is her compass. And if something feels off, she doesn't insist. She gives thanks and moves on. In her nights alone, there's no drama. There's music, reading, quiet laughter, silence that soothes. Sometimes there's longing, but not for someone, rather for herself, in times when she didn't know who she was. She finds herself a little more each day, and that reunion has no end. It's a continuous, dynamic, living process. It's not about reaching a final version of herself, but about staying true to her essence, even when the world tries to convince her otherwise. And that's what makes her so rare. The woman who has learned to be alone without feeling incomplete radiates a kind of confidence that needs no spectacle. When she says no, it's not a game, it's respect. When she distances herself, it's not punishment, it's protection. When she chooses silence, it's because she understands that not everything deserves a response. She's already spent too much energy trying to fix what wasn't her responsibility. She's patched up relationships too torn to mend. Now, she prefers real emptiness to a presence that pretends. She prefers a Saturday with herself to a date that drains her. She'd rather be misunderstood than mistreated. And that stance is unsettling. Because it shows that it's possible to live well without depending on someone else's presence. It shows that self-love isn't an empty phrase, it's a daily practice. It shows that happiness isn't about being chosen, but about choosing oneself. And that, as simple as it seems, is a revolutionary act. She doesn't want to be adored, she doesn't want to be idealized. She wants to be seen in her wholeness, with her good and bad days, her certainties and confusions, her strength and her vulnerability. And that's rarer than one might think. She's already realized there's no need to rush anything. That the kind of love that's worth it isn't the one that comes in a hurry, but the one that arrives with presence. It doesn't matter if it comes in a week, in 5 years, or never, because her life isn't on hold. It's happening now with intensity, with beauty, with authenticity. The woman who lives alone without a man is not stagnant. She is blooming where once there was emptiness. Every small act of self-care, every consciously made decision, every respected boundary, all of it is a sign that she stopped abandoning herself to fit into someone else's expectations. Many people still feel uncomfortable around women like her because they don't know where to place them, how to label them. They escape easy categories. They are too free to be defined by relationship status, too independent to be seen as looking, too sensitive to endure shallow relationships. She's not closed off to love, but she doesn't idolize it. She understands that to love is a profound act that requires emotional responsibility, genuine surrender, and above all, maturity. That's why she's no longer dazzled by performative gestures, by intentions not backed by actions. She observes, she feels, she waits the necessary time, and if there's no reciprocity, she moves on in peace. She doesn't hold grudges. She just doesn't forget what took her so long to learn. She knows she paid dearly for silencing her own intuition. And now that she has reclaimed the right to listen to herself, she won't give that up again. Her life no longer revolves around the fear of loneliness. It revolves around truth, around real connections, the lightness that comes when there's no need to pretend, to compete for attention, or to shrink to be accepted. She doesn't want to be half of anything. She won't be shaped, trimmed, or reduced. She'd rather walk alone than be accompanied by someone who doesn't understand her depth. This woman reflects a broader transformation. She represents a new cycle, a new feminine narrative being written by many, in silence, between the lines of everyday life. Women who got tired of being defined by their ability to please, who decided to stop sacrificing their identity for fragile bonds. She lives with dignity, and dignity isn't arrogance. It's the solid ground where true love may one day bloom. If it comes, great. If not, may life continue full of meaning, presence, and light. Deep down, she still wants to love. Of course she does, but not just any way. She longs for a love where she can breathe, where her soul doesn't have to hide. A love that can handle both light and shadow, that understands true intimacy isn't built in haste, but in steady presence. That knows loving also means listening, yielding, growing together. But until that kind of love appears, she remains here, faithful to her journey, loyal to her own soul. And that is enough. And if you've made it this far, maybe you felt something that goes beyond words. Maybe you remembered yourself, a woman you admire, or an old longing to reconnect. If this video touched you, if it lit a flame of recognition within you, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Here, we build a space of truth where every story matters. Tell us in the comments, have you ever experienced something like this? What lessons did this video awaken in you? Your story could be the spark that ignites someone else's journey. Let's strengthen this community with listening, presence, and sharing, the way these women deserve.